All right. Thank you very much for your time. Welcome to our humble little session. My name's Ben Fletcher. I'm an Office 365 technical specialist, and I focus on helping customers and partners ready themselves for Office 365, both pre and post deployment. We're very fortunate to have with us Ronnie Alted, who has done a lot of work in this area with partners and customers, bringing the other data to Office 365, and we're very fortunate to have his experience and tips that we'll be sharing with you today. So we're very fortunate. Thank you, Ronnie, for joining us.
Thank you.
So first of all, this is kind of I guess a real working kind of session, because if you're here and you've read the title, you know exactly what this session is about. There are lots of sessions at Ignites and TechEds and all sorts of things about how do you migrate live users and Exchange hybrid mode and all that goodness to get your current users using the cloud as fast as possible. So this is not a session about that. This is, okay, what about the other stuff? And hopefully you're here and you sort of appreciate that we're going to be talking about that question and what we do. So what's our agenda for today? First of all, a bit of terminology, and we're going to be effectively saying what we are going to cover and what we're not going to cover, just so you're sort of clear about what it is we're going to be talking about. Talking about what provided by Microsoft through the tools and through the interface in terms of being able to import Exchange data. And we're kind of focusing on what I'm calling inactive data, inactive users, and stuff that doesn't attach to live users. Then we'll do a similar thing around SharePoint. What are the tools and what can you do in that space? And then we'll be handing over to Ronnie, by which point you'll be thanking me because you'll be falling asleep. Not really. And Ronnie's going to share some great tips. So basically, Ronnie's session is going to provide you with, I think, 20 things to remember that are just going to make anything you do in the space much, much better from real-world experience. So let's kick on. What aren't we talking about? As I said before, I'm calling it non-archived email for active users. That means email that's either residing on your file server in a PST. Who here has those? Yep. Now, what do you do with them? What about email that's archived in an on-premises Exchange? What about email that's archived into third-party archive and compliance products? Absolutely. So that's what we're talking about. Email for a live user. There are plenty of sessions you can go to about migrating users and the different ways you can do it. The other thing that we're not going to talk about is how do you migrate a SharePoint site? We're not talking about that. That is a whole conversation and a topic and a whole bunch of work in its own right. Fundamentally, because when you talk about a SharePoint site, you could be talking about a document library, you could be talking about a portal, you could be talking about a knowledge base or a search engine. It could be a whole bunch of things, and each site needs to be migrated on its merits. It may have customizations that need attention. That's a huge task. What we are talking about today, it's going to keep it fairly simple, is, as I said, email for inactive users, those PST files that are lying around on your desktops or your file servers. How do we do archived and journaled email, potentially into third-party solutions? And at a basic level, you just want to get stuff on your file servers into SharePoint because you have a large SharePoint estate, you have a fair bit of storage, and you want it to start using SharePoint Online's capabilities around multi-editor files and Office Online and all that other goodness. So we'll give you a quick snippet of how you can get those files into SharePoint. So, as you probably noted, active versus inactive, from a terminology point of view, what we're saying is active is someone who's currently using information. And particularly in an Exchange sense, you've got an active user, they'll have an active mailbox. That's a migration task. Inactive is the other stuff, and I guess I work with customers of all sizes, as shapes or types, government, corporates, finance, education, and there's always that excitement of moving active users so they can use online productivity. And it's great, it's a great story. And then there's the next conversation where the IT administrators, what do we do with this other stuff? So that's what we're trying to here to show you, the different approaches and the tools. And what I'm going to attempt to do is give you a demo of a newly released capability that's part of the service. You may have read about it, which is a much better scaled network import capability of PST files, as well as a disk shipping capability. So that's some of the stuff that we'll kind of go through today. So when we talk about active versus inactive, as I said, well documented by partners. So what is available to you to move inactive content when you're talking about Exchange? So there are built-in tools. And they are fairly sort of basic, except the ones I show you today are a little bit more advanced and designed to scale a lot larger. There's third-party tools, and certainly they play a huge part in this, particularly if you are using a third-party platform. And Ronnie will go into a lot more detail around what does that mean, what does it look like, things you have to take into account. You could do it yourself. And if you are an organisation of 10 to 20 users or fewer, that's probably a good tactic. If you're hundreds of users and you're talking about thousands of files, manually dragging them into the browser can take a little while. There's also, if you want to, there's also other tools such as you could import it via a PST file into Outlook and have that sync. There's all sorts of different manual ways that we've seen it. And these are kind of all, I meant to make it sound a little bit sort of messy because it sort of is. Now when you buy Office 365, used to be called the Onboarding Center, now we have the Fast Track Center. And to a certain extent, they can help you. So there's some things that they are looking at doing. At the moment, it's a fairly limited scope in terms of what they do. But the Fast Track Center is continuously expanding what it's capable of doing. If it's able to be commoditized and repeatably provided as a service, you can bet your dollar the Fast Track service is looking to try and provide a service to its customers around that. And lastly, partners. Partners are actually probably the most important aspect of all of this, because that's where everyone goes to get that sort of expertise and excellence around, okay, how do we do this in a way that our organisation suits us? So that's fundamentally the ways that we kind of deal with it. Now, inactive Exchange data, I kind of mentioned this. These are some of the tools that we provide, as in Microsoft provide, or you can get access to. The first one there is PST Capture. Has anyone heard of PST Capture? Is anyone actually using PST Capture? So PST Capture has two aspects to it. It's got the ability to find PST files in your environment, and that's a good thing. It also has the ability to upload PST files. The challenge with the PST Capture product is it's a basic product. It's single-threaded, and it's not really suitable for enterprises. So I'll call that out right now. We've had some enterprises trying to migrate 4,000 users worth of archived content using PST Capture. It just buckled under the pressure. So that's one capability. It's great for a couple of users. Wouldn't recommend it if you're small, medium, or large. Now, because we've had this fledgling offering, we've now got this capability that is starting to be rolled out. So if you currently have a tenant based out of APAC and you're on the first release program, so basically you've ticked yes, I want stuff first, this capability has already been deployed into APAC for those customers. This is an ability to use either an advanced network import capability, which I'm going to show you today, or drive shipping. So the drive shipping is effectively a way that we allow you to take your PST files, put them onto a disk and ship the disk to us, and then we'll ingest it and put it where it needs to go. The way that works is that, first of all, just a disk in the wild going via, I think the two carriers that we support are FedEx and DHL at the moment because of their very complex and robust logistics capabilities. And I think that's all on our website. The key thing around drive shipping is that we require it to be on a drive that is BitLocked. So the process I'll show you, very boring demo, I'm going to format a disk, but I'm just going to show you what the process is in terms of it's actually this tool that's prepping the drive, encrypting it with a BitLocker key, and creating a journal so that you can then send that disk off to us and then have a job that you register so that when we receive the disk, we'll import that into the Azure Blob service. And effectively, there's also a mapping file. So you'll have a bunch of PSTs, user 1, user 2, user 3, user 4, and then an Excel file that will say user1.pst goes to user1@company.com, user2, etc., etc. And so you're able to actually dictate which PST file is going to go to which account. But you can also state whether it goes into their inbox, whether it goes into their archive, whether it goes into a subfolder of either. There's a lot of controls that you have around it. So, and hopefully I'll be able to show you that by an example. The network import is the same sort of process, except you're just cutting out the disk shipping component. I will call out the current guidance it seems to be around the 10 terabyte mark. Do I go network or do I go drive ship? If you have more than 10 terabytes, consider the drive shipping when more details come out about it. If it's less than 10 terabytes, at the moment we're saying use the network import. So fundamentally, they're kind of the tools out of the Office 365 portal that we're going to provide. So let's dive in and have a quick demo, which is 5. So the first thing I'm going to show you is this screen is from my Office 365 portal. Probably easier if I show you where that came from. So in the portal, there is this import tab.
I'm going to watch too.
There's this import tab. And all I've done is effectively go start a new upload files over the network screen. And that's what you get back. The reason why I'm showing you this is that this screen has all the information that I use to create this demo and to talk about the content. It's all housed here. These two links here go to the sites that explain the whole process, what you need to do, the prep, the tools, where you download the tools, and the extra bits. So if you have an Office 365 tenant, when you get this import capability, all the guidance will be available to you. I'll try and make also the links available after the fact as well. Additionally, if this Azure as copy, that's used to actually do some of the copying into an Azure blob effectively. So, and I'll show you an example of that being used. This is the important thing. This is effectively, and when I'm showing it here, but effectively you need to treat that as you would a password. This is your storage key to your Azure blob where you're actually going to upload stuff. Additionally, here are the URLs to get to your Azure blob, where this is where you'll stage your PST files and also your SharePoint files. And from there, it will be ingested into the service. So key thing, this screen has all of the guidance and content, everything I mentioned. This is the landing page that eventually it came from. So let's kick on. Now I've kind of pre-canned the commands to try and make this run as smoothly as possible. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have here a drive I pulled out of the cupboard. I will note this drive is not a supported drive. It has to be a SATA interface, and the details of what are required again on the site. I'm just doing this just for the purpose of a cheap demo. Fundamentally, if I scroll in, this WA import export. This is what I use, and I'm just going to explain what the commands mean. First of all, prep import. This is the command that you run. Effectively, it's going to create a journal. That needs to be a unique journal. Because I've run this before, if I ran this one again with HDD7, it would fail. So I'm going to need to change that number. The source directory is where are my PSTs. And that could be a file server. So if you have aggregated all your PSTs and put it into a file server, then you point this at the file server, and it's going to pull all the PSTs in that file structure from there and put them onto the disk. Now, this destination directory is where it's going in the Azure blob effectively. And another really useful tool, again from those links, is this Azure Storage Explorer. So once you import stuff, you can actually see what it looks like and where it's going. It's kind of just useful to check, hey, I've done this import, how do I see if it's actually there or not? This is actually a cool way. Number one, to see I've done this morning 4 times, 4 different PST files that I've tested this demo for. But when I run it again, you'll see that you'll be able to see it's actually there. The other thing also is if you want to double check paths and things, you can see what path it's actually using there to make sure that your mapping file will match here. I'll explain what that does in a moment. So let's keep going. Now, storage key, that's effectively allows me to actually upload into that blob. And the other parts of the command are pretty straightforward. Format, so I'm going to format this drive and I'm going to encrypt it, which is going to create a BitLocker key, and it will return that BitLocker key back to me. It's going to overwrite everything there. So let's run this. Actually, first I need to change that number. And we run it here. And let's see if I have done it. So it's going to do a quick check, make sure I'm happy with what it's doing. It will format all the drive. Yes, I want it to format. And it won't take very long to do. So first of all, it's going to format it, it's going to encrypt it, and it's going to copy all the files across. Because it's BitLocker, if I want to attach it, and you'll see now that the drive is going to be available because it's applying BitLocker and it's available to the OS. If I want to access that drive at a future time, I'm going to need to take note of that BitLocker key that's just come up. So it's a BitLocker drive. That's the first thing to note. I like this bit. It's encryption 99%. It'll do it 4 times. So it's and then should be now. It should be good to go. And it's done. So I had one very small file for purposes of the demo. You would run that for as long as it took to get all of those files on there. Now let's have a look how that appeared on the drive, which is that one. So now this is a BitLocker drive with a folder with my PST4 file in it, and effectively a manifest that has a whole bunch of information around that. So I'm not going to do the next step because it's the same as the network import, and I'm going to do that in a moment.
You have to manage your own file sizes depending on the install or disk is
I think at this stage you have to apply a little bit of manual work. So maybe if you're running 4 terabyte drives, then don't. Yeah. So I haven't seen any intelligence that will allow you to, have like a zip file. You can break them up. I don't think I think it's pretty straightforward and manual. The one comment I will add to that before we move on to the next bit is we've had requests from customers that, okay, BitLocker drive, that's good. I want to apply another layer of protection on it. And so what we've provided, and it's sort of in a preview mode at the moment, again, all information's on the site. You can, if you have rights management, Azure Rights Management, either through a 365 subscription or through Azure subscription, over those files that have been put on the disk, you can now put a rights management layer across it, which is applying effectively another layer of encryption. That's the keys are held by Azure RMS. So that means that you're putting an encrypted PST file onto a BitLocker encrypted drive. And you can see where we're going. We're trying to make it as secure as possible whilst it's in transit. So that's an option for you as well to further secure those PST files. So now the next step of the disk ship is effectively what you have to do for the network import. So I'm going to switch now to the network import. Now for Exchange PST files, the command is actually an as copy. It's sort of an Azure storage copy. It's not using Exchange PowerShell or an Exchange specific capability. And you can see what we've done here is we've got source is going to be from this folder that I've created, the more PSTs network. The destination, this is the value I pulled from that first slide I showed you, that first window I showed you. So that's how that fits in. The destination key, again, that's the Azure blob key. And effectively verbose logging to that log. So let's first of all rename the file just so that we know that it's unique. 6. So file 6 PST, and And what we want to do is run this command here. So this is, again, it's another downloaded component in order to run that command. It's effectively an Azure Storage Management Shell, and that's going to go ahead and upload that into my Azure staging blob. Is anyone using the Wi-Fi? It's mine. I did make the requisite sacrifice to the demo god. Come on, you can do this. Okay, whilst that's, oh, hey, there we go. A bit impatient. So we now have a file there, and to show you that that worked, I'll just go and refresh my Azure Storage Blob Explorer, and you'll see that there's now a bit of ingestion data, and you'll see there's that file 6PST. So we've now uploaded that file into, now that's only a staging area, that's just to get it into the cloud. How do we get it from there into the right mailbox? That's the next step. So effectively, once we've done that, we now need to open up, that's the wrong one, this CSV file. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to be file 6 because that's the one that we uploaded. And you can see here there's lots of options you can do around this. What I'm doing here is, first of all, make sure that path matches the path that's in Azure so that it knows where to find it. I'm created 2 mailboxes, and all I've done is the same file I want imported into 2 different mailboxes. And this may not be realistic, it's just to show you how it works. Now I've got Ronnie's email, and I want that to be imported into his archive, his personal archive. Whereas I want the same file imported into my mailbox, and I also want it to go into my inbox. This one here being blank will import it into a folder called imported, and then you can do whatever you need to do in there. This one is going to inject it at the root, so inbox will merge with inbox, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's the format we're going to do, and to kick it off, again, back into here we go, upload files over the network. Now I'm done uploading my files and I have access to the mapping file. I now call it something, and I'm going to use a very intelligible name. I'll now select that file, which was that one. I agree to terms and conditions, which everyone of course reads all words. And it will upload that file and it will kick off a job. Now that might take a little while, so I'm going to power on to talk about SharePoint while that's doing its thing. But you'll see in here that there's a couple of imports, and that's the one that I just created, and I can view details about where it's at and what it's doing. Okay, so it's only just started, so we might just come back to that. I have two inboxes, one for Ronnie and one for me open that we can come back to later and check whether how that's faring. So that's the drive shipping and network import service that is currently being rolled out. It's not generally rolled out. So basically, if you have a Singapore or Hong Kong tenant today and you're on first release, that functionality has been rolled out. Others will get it as time comes. So, cool. Any questions at all? Yep.
So when is that time coming? Easy question?
No, unfortunately, the way, I don't know, the full stop, I don't know. I know the way that we roll out features and updates is very much a first release gets it first. I will call out that the drive shipping capability today is not available in the Australian region. So if you have an Australian tenant, and that's a good thing, that you've either migrated there or you've created a tenant there, that's really good. But the capability to do drive shipping is not available today. So unfortunately, I have no dates. The way we tend to do rollouts is everyone that's on first release goes first, and then we'll start during the general population, if you want to call it that, in terms of, the way we do it is we do 1 server, 2 server, 4, 8, 16, 32. We do it in increasing increments so that effectively it's just part of the management cycle at the data center ops run it. Short answer is, I'm sorry, I don't know. So, moving along, question, yep?
Is there any validation on the PST files that are imported? So, for example, is there any way of knowing that particular emails have come in, or are we just got to trust that it's going to import 100%? PSTs are notorious quite often corrupted.
Yeah. The only thing I've seen is you do get a report in terms of how many files were imported. So there might be some manual. If you know this PST had 1,000 files and it says 910 emails were imported, you know that maybe some extra checking's required. That's all I've seen. This is a V1 of the product, and I don't know if that level of error checking but the reporting is definitely there in terms of how many items were actually imported. So. Yes, so that's Excel spreadsheet. I had Ronnie's as is archive true, which means that it will go to his archive, and had me false, which means it will go to my inbox, or maybe it's the other way around. So absolutely, you can do that. So when it comes to, just cover off importing SharePoint data quickly. A couple of ways you can do this. Again, there's the manual option, and this is very manual, dragging every file into a browser so that it uploads. Using the OneDrive for Business client, we've had customers seriously consider this. And what that is, it's using the ability for OneDrive to sync with SharePoint sites. So they'll have a staging machine that they then sync with SharePoint sites, not just OneDrive for Business, and then they'll put the files in and have them uploaded that way. Yes, that's technically going to work, but it's a lot of manual handling. So it's an option, but I'm only sort of sharing it. Some customers have done it. It's not one that I would ever sort of recommend to a customer. And then, of course, we've got SharePoint Data Import and SharePoint Drive Ship, which works very similar to the way the Exchange one does, and I'll show you that now. But fundamentally, the principle is the same. But as you'll notice, the way that the SharePoint team has implemented it is all through SharePoint PowerShell, as opposed to using the Azure copy capability. The result's similar, just a different sort of road. So let's go here. So you'll notice here on this particular file, oh, you can't see anything. So on this file here, I said the workload was Exchange, which means that when I do the import, when I do that job, it knows that it's looking for Exchange files. The other one I have here is a sample of a SharePoint config file. So here it says SharePoint. It's not done by user, it's done by site. So you have a bunch of files that you want to go to a particular site or a particular site collection. Here, the site URL, I've created a site collection called some document, and what I want is the files that I've got in a particular location to end up in that document library. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. The first thing, as I said, is it's all using SharePoint Online PowerShell. So if I now go to my PowerShell, I will call out a few things. The first thing is, don't know if anyone here is interested or not, but one of the things, I found this by accident in the last 2 days, which is kind of interesting. So that's our connect URL typically. I'll expand that so you can see it. That's our connect URL to get onto the service. It's something that we have to do. Now, I don't have any swag, but you'll get my appreciation if you can answer this question. What is significant about this? Someone said it, but someone put his hand up, so you can. Yeah, so this is using Active Directory Authentication Library. It's only been rolled out in the last few days to first release customers. it means that one of the things that we've had from enterprises is multi-factor auth, that's great, really like it, but PowerShell is usually by administrators that have high level of accounts. How do we get multi-factor auth on PowerShell? So this is the first inkling that it's there. So it kind of caught me off. I wasn't expecting it. But what it means, though, is that when you're connecting to SharePoint Online, you can now enforce multi-factor auth in order to do any sort of PowerShell. So that's brand new. The reason why I call it out is it got in the way in terms of what I was trying to do. So I actually still want to use BASIC over SSL because I haven't enforced multi-factor auth because that's required by the service. So first of all, I log on to the service, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if you want to know what my password is. And that's going to connect to the service. Now, the first command, there's a couple of things that we need to do here. And before I do that, just to show you what it looks like, I've got a folder called SP files, and in there I have 5 files. And I want to import those files. Now, effectively, there's a couple of steps that need to occur. First of all, it needs to connect. We've done that. The next thing I need to do is create a package. If you're looking at this stuff, I found this out the hard way. At the end there, no AD lookup. If you don't specify that, your machine is not going to let you proceed until you have a domain join machine that it can connect to. So there I was on the weekend trying to get this demo to work, and it was trying to hook into our AD servers. So if you're off the network or you don't have a domain join machine, that no AD lookup is your savior because that'll allow you to do all this stuff and it's not going to refer back. I don't know why it's doing it, but that's how you get around it. So fundamentally, we need to create a new migration package and hit copy. And what was that? There. Oh, okay, done. And all that does pretty much is it creates this folder and creates a whole bunch of information, metadata, manifest information ready for import. So that's the first thing. It creates a package ready to go. The next thing we do is now need to convert it into a format that's suitable for a SharePoint Online import. Now, it also is going to make sure against my site that I want to send it to that it's suitable, that it's ready and can actually go in there. So this is kind of like a checking stage in terms of what it does. And again, run this and that looks all good. Hang on, I didn't get all of it. Wait a while, connects to the service, and does a bit of a comparison. So this is kind of like a pre-staging, a pre-flight check, if you want to call it that. Once that's done, you'll see that we now have another little area, targeted package, which again has those same files, but they're checked ready to fly. At this point, we actually want to upload it into Azure. Now I'm going to change these package names because that way you can see. So I'm going to go back to my Azure Blob Storage. You'll see all these packages, etc., that I've done with tests previously. And you'll see the files. These are the files that I want to upload. The package, these are all of those XML files. So when we execute this, you'll actually see, look at that, you'll actually see them get uploaded to there, which is done to here. I'm going to call it package X and files X, just so it's really clear what we're doing. So again, this is ending up in that same Azure Blob Storage area, and we can then use a similar format file to get it from there into Office 365. So that's done, and just to show you that there's no smoke and mirrors here. One more refresh and we're good. So package X and files X. So effectively now I upload one of those Excel files, I'm mapping it to a particular site, away you go. And that's how you get your files from a file server into a SharePoint site.
Ben, does it just copy the folder? You do select the files and
think it's. So I do know that if you want permissions, so the question was that can you add extra metadata, etc., on the way in? Not 100% sure. There is another process where you can export from an existing SharePoint site, and it tries to maintain as much as possible. The example I had was from a file server. It's going to import it from a file server. And you can opt to have it maintain permissions, but the metadata thing I'm not aware of, and it's not there. I'm just not aware of it. So, yep.
The legal characters. Is there any checking for that during the upload process?
So in terms of, I've come across it in terms of the name of the files and the names of the jobs and those sorts of things. I haven't tested it, so maybe it's there. I went for the working demo, not the breaking demo. So, so I'll just do, last part of this is to see how we've gone here and see if we have some mail. So it must, there's a imported folder, and you'll see in there, and there's a whole bunch of imported mail. So for Ronnie, I've said, okay, import your mail into the archive, whereas for me, it, in theory, should have gone into my inbox, but, we got halfway there anyway. I'll work out, maybe the job's still running, I haven't actually checked. So that's what's meant to happen. You choose PST file, blob storage, choose where it goes. So that's kind of just a quick demo. That is brand new capability functionality using Azure as a staging area, getting stuff into the staging area and then importing it where it needs to go within your 365. So we're going to sort of change tack now in terms of looking at stuff and how you do it using the Microsoft tools and come to probably the important bit, which is the real-world experiences that Ronnie can share with you around importing inactive mail, etc. So.
This stuff's really riveting, huh? You guys look all so excited. It's not going to get any better, I promise. I'll try. All right. So we're going to talk about real-world experiences. I'll give you just as I go through the presentation, and for those of you in the back corner, you probably can't see me, so I'm not going to stand behind here because then you definitely won't see me.
It's only Mario.
I'm going to go through, just weave through into the conversation some real-world experiences. We've got probably about 30 minutes to get through content, so I can leave 5 minutes for questions, but do ask questions on the way through as you have been with Ben. And I'll stick around. I could speak about this stuff for hours and often do, by the way. In fact, my mother, who's 85 years old, that I ferry in my car, gets in my car and listens to the phone call. She's, migrations? That's what my mother says to me, right? So it's a big part of our business, is what we tend to do a lot of. And no, I'm not going to get my mum to come and talk to you, I promise. Okay, so what we're going to do is talk about, firstly, do you do manual or do you do automated? That's the first decision that you need to make, right? So what Ben's been talking about is arguably a manual process, right? So it's all well and good to say I can move my PSTs and I have a way that I can do that with Microsoft. The real question is how are you getting the PSTs in the first place, right? That's what, if you're looking at a PST-based scenario, and I think there are a few hands. Can I just have actually just quickly a quick show of hands of who hates putting their hands up when they get asked to show hands in a presentation? Yeah, cool, okay. So I won't ask you to do that again. Sorry, Ben. So the first thing is, how am I going to do this at a manual level? How am I going to do it? Or am I going to go automated? If you make the decision to go automated, you need a third-party tool. If you make the decision to go manual, you just need to know what you're letting yourself in for. And there are absolute use cases where manual migrations do make sense, and there are absolute times where we do recommend to clients that they do go manually, just simply because the cost of doing it in an automated fashion doesn't necessarily fit with the budget that an organisation has, and they'd rather feel the pain than they would feel the pain of the dollars. Okay, so that's sort of, and we're going to talk in more detail about those key considerations. There are 10 of those, manual v automated. There's a lot of information I'm going to go through here. I tend to talk very quickly. I'm not going to speak to every point on the slide because the slides will be made available for everybody. So have a read, have a listen. Let's see if between reading and listening you'll pick up the key tidbits that you need to pick up. So the first thing is, and this is really a key point that's going to determine whether you go manual or whether you don't, and it's going to be driven by the retentiveness, shall we say, of your legal and compliance department or the organisation you work for, and by virtue of that, the fact that you do need to have chain of custody. So let me get everybody on the same page with the term chain of custody. As it relates to what we're talking about, chain of custody is the ability to empirically prove that what you've taken from source A and moved to source B has not changed. So that way, when it needs to be presented in a court, it can be presented as immutable evidence. Okay, so if your organisation is financial services, if your organisation is some health, if your organisation in building need to keep information in the life of the building plus 25 years, your organisation will drive what you're doing here. And often what you'll find is that if you put an archive in place to deal with compliance-related requirements and e-discovery, chain of custody usually comes hand in hand with that. If your archive has been implemented primarily to save storage on your SAN and to make your exchange environment more manageable, then on that basis, chain of custody may or may not be important to you because really you are doing it from a storage perspective. So you need to understand and work with your legal and compliance departments to understand if chain of custody is important. If it is, you can't go manual, okay? Because there is no way to do it manually. There are lots of things you can do, like bit locking drives and encrypting it and making sure that it isn't going to change, but there's always going to be, again, if someone's really retentive, they're always going to find a hole where someone may have been able to make a change. Sometimes you don't have a choice but to do things in a two-step process and have PSTs as a transition sense, and sometimes that makes sense in terms of bandwidth. We'll come to that in a moment. Infrastructure. If you're going to go manual and you have a third-party archive in your environment, it's going to get stressed, okay? I guarantee you that that environment will be stressed because you're using the archive and its native capability, or lack thereof in a lot of cases, to extract that data. So during that process, your archive process is going to be slow, your access is going to be slow, etc. Third-party tools often don't even worry about the fact that the archive's even running. So long as they can see the database and the data, they'll be able to suck the data out and move them directly into 365. That's a big thing as well, right, is that direct one-to-one. So not two-step process. One of the big issues with the approach that Ben was showing you in terms of that Excel spreadsheet, holy hammer, would you like to have your PST file and some admin who's had a really big night the night before take the CEO's PST file and assign it to somebody else? Very easy mistake to make, right? And you chuckle, but it's happened, okay? So doing it manually, particularly just the two-step process, is going to be slower. Extracting data manually out of your archive using the native lack of capability, and I do say lack of capability because the archives, whilst they have that archive tool sets, Enterprise Vault, SourceOne, Email Extender, HP RIS, Common Store, all of them have the ability to extract manually. The problem is that that function that's in the tool set was never designed to do en masse exports. That was designed because user A is moving to Perth and we want to move their archive now with them to Perth or to London or somewhere else. 1, 2, 3 at a time, not hundreds of archives. Our rule of thumb is typically if you're less than 500 users, you may be able to get away with it, but realistically it's 200 users and below would be where you might consider doing it manually out of the tool set. Troublesome data. Trying to do an extract PST. Anybody here tried to do, I don't want to ask you, I told you not to put your hands up. Somebody in this room will have tried to do this with a manual process and it will have failed. Okay, because I can guarantee you that your source archive, no matter which one it is, will have some corrupt data stored inside of it. It's a given, right? The rule of thumb for us is 0.01% to 1% of data has some degree of corruption. And corruption doesn't necessarily mean you can't extract it. Corruption means that trying to do it to a PST ain't going to work. And so what happens is you extract it to PST, it hits a dung message. As soon as it hits that message, it stops the process, doesn't tell you which message it is, and you're in there and you're doing it again. So you've actually got to sit there and watch this thing all day, every day. It's like watching grass grow, right? So that you can ensure that, if it fails, you can kick it off again, and you can kick it off again. We had a client, by the way, who we quoted to do an extraction, 750 users, 3 terabytes for a component of their archive, where the users were moving to Singapore. Gave them the quote, client had the I'd rather take the manual pain approach, took the manual pain, rang me 9 months later and said, I need you to quote to do the balance of our archive. I said, oh, why? Didn't your manual process, how did that go? And I tell you, these were his exact words. My staff are still in therapy, Ronnie. I'm not going to do that again, okay? From a reporting perspective, you get no reporting when you do a manual extraction. You don't know what message failed, you don't know why they failed, you don't know what you can do about it, so therefore you can't report chain of custody because messages that don't go to the question that was asked before, if the message doesn't go, you don't know which message didn't go. So if you've got a PST that's got 30,000 archives in, 30,000 messages in it, and it tells you 29,995, who wants to go find the 5? Right? Good luck. Okay? Shortcuts and stubs. These are always interesting. Shortcuts, stubs, different, same thing, different terminology. People see them differently. That little bit that gets left in your inbox to make the user experience all lovely. So, right, so we can put it in the archive and guess what? Keep the users unknown. They don't even know it's gone there. The icon changed, but they won't work that out. These things can be killers when you're going to 365, particularly if you put yourself into legal hold mode. Okay, if you move a mailbox that's got stubs in it to 365 and you're on legal hold, when you do a discovery and you actually put the final message in there, you're going to get 2 messages because you're not going to be able to delete the shortcut. Apart from anything else, the shortcuts often don't work. Okay, we have customers sometimes who say, oh, but I've done a migration and I've moved it up there and my shortcuts work. My question is, do they work for everyone? Well, no. Do they work consistently? No. Right? Part of the problem with the shortcuts is even on on-premise systems where you have an archive, the shortcuts tend to fail, so you need to do things to fix it. You can't fix them in 365. Okay, so if you do a manual extraction and you put them into a PST, etc., that's going to cause you some grief. 9 and 10. I think this would be 9 and 10. Has anyone been keeping count? Don't put your hand up to tell me. It's cool. Okay, so the user experience. If you're doing it via PST in a manual way, what you typically need to do is stop archiving before you extract to PST because you'll do an extraction and if you keep archiving, how do you go and get the delta? If you use an automated tool, you can keep archiving. Once the live mailbox is migrated, you can then do a quick delta sync at the same time. It'll pick up what it hasn't picked up and send them straight across. So the user experience is going to be really interesting, and that's also a problem if your Exchange server can't cope with archiving being turned off because it's kind of choking as it is, which might be part of why you're moving it in the first place. Somebody mentioned PST files. Can I control sizes manually? No. Automated, yes. Can I control what's in the PST and did it make it to the PST? Manually, no. Automated, yes. So there's a lot of reasons why automated has a lot of value. What you need to do is make that decision first. If you decide that you want to go automated, then we can start to look at the considerations of what happens automated, which is what we're going to do here. And here's my catch-all. There are a bunch of other problems with doing it manually. Okay? But I say that not because I'm trying to convince you to go automated. I say that just so that you are aware of what you will let yourself in for, because sometimes it does make sense to go manually. Okay? It does. I just want you to be leaving here with the things that you need to think about when you're making this decision, and for those of you who need to make business cases, the things that you can use to help make your business case. So, that was 10 of those, by the way. If you weren't keeping count, there were. This time I'm going to number them for you so that you don't have to keep count. All right, so let's focus on what this is. Now you've decided you want to go automated. Okay, you want to use a third-party tool. You have some requirement out of the list of 10 reasons why you shouldn't. Okay, some requirement that's driving you to that process. The first thing you need to do is understand what your business needs. And the reason why I say that is because I can tell you quite candidly, automated extractions are not cheap exercises. Okay, you have a software component and you have a services component. And unfortunately for all of us, the software ISVs all happen to be where the exchange rate sucks. Okay, so the worse the US dollar gets, the more these projects get expensive. So the reason why I suggest you start with the business outcomes is so that when you look at the number 2 there, around the things that you could do to reduce the volume of data, that will reduce the amount of software that you need to procure, and therefore will reduce the overall cost of your project. If, however, your business requirement is we absolutely have to take absolutely every piece of data to 365, then you know that that's what it's going to cost you. If, however, your business says, I don't need to move data for users that have left our organisation. I don't need to move data more than 3 years old. I don't need to move data for the users that are in my business for more than 1 year, but the ones that have left, I'd like to put 2 years, all sorts of different machinations as to what type of data and whose data you want to move. If you don't know what the business requirements are, you can't then make the second decision. Okay? And as we go through, with the other considerations here, you'll see why the business objectives are really important through those. Big question we get asked. Which order? In fact, to be honest, we don't get asked. We have to keep telling people which way to do it. Okay? We have to often encourage organisations the right way to do it. If you are an organisation that has Exchange 2007, you are more than likely going to have a third-party tool set that's going to move your primary mailbox with you. If you're in 2007, albeit you can be in hybrid mode, the one critical thing you cannot do is enable a personal archive in 365 and have them both available at the same time. If you're 2010 or 2013, no problem. So if you're 2010 and 2013 and you can enable the personal archive, then absolutely you must move your archive first. Critical point, okay? If you can't enable the personal archive, then you have no choice but to move it at the same time as your primary mailbox. The way that we recommend that you move your archive into 365 first is often we will say, how about you move the first 12 months of data there, so that when the user gets there, they've already got 12 months and then we'll backfeed the balance of their data. Okay, so that's how we can make the project run and not necessarily hinder your live mail, but get ahead of your live mail. Interestingly enough, we're going to talk about how, whether speed matters later on, and this is an important point in whether speed matters and how you do it. Chain of custody we've spoken about. I'm not going to go into that in any more detail right now. Before we go on to number 5, you're now like 14 in. Any questions at this point? Shoot.
Why do you recommend going first with the archive?
User experience. Okay, so few things. Firstly, if you've got shortcuts in your inbox, that shortcut discussion that we had. Okay, the shortcuts won't work necessarily, those sorts of things. That's the first thing. The second thing is we can typically get your archive to 365 faster than you're ever going to get your mail to 365. Big statement, bold statement, I know. Okay? The protocols that are used in the third-party tool sets are way more advanced, or they leverage a lot. There's some new protocols that Microsoft's released. It's not AWS. It's a version of AWS, if you like. FastStream allows us to migrate. Depending on your bandwidth, it will depend on how fast we can migrate, but we will get your archives there first, and we take them out of the critical path of your primary mailbox. So if you can activate the personal archive, map it to the user. Once you've got the archives in there, you can just stop archiving for them. They use it. When you move the mailbox, nothing changes. So the user experience is significantly better. Okay, and then of course the e-discovery problems with shortcuts. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Cool. Is there another question? Someone else had a hand up somewhere, I think. No? Like, you guys are all scared to put your hand up now, aren't you? All right. Archive policy management. That's another thing you need to think about. If you're going to turn on legal hold in 365 and you do move your mailbox first, the shortcut issue is the thing you've got to be concerned about there. Okay, so depending on what your retention policies are that you set in 365, you may end up having them there twice. We did a migration for a client in the US. We migrated 40,000 archives for them, and their decision was that they didn't really mind that the shortcuts were going to be there. They wanted to move live mail first. There were some reasons in their business that they needed to do that to affect some outcomes that they had to do. Again, number one, business requirements. So it does happen. And they, it was quite interesting because the e-discovery team wasn't affiliated with the IT team, so the IT team said, I don't care if the e-discovery guys need to look at 2 messages, not my problem. I've got to deliver a business outcome, which is get the mail to 365 quickly because my Exchange environment's got to get going as soon as possible. Okay, so there are sometimes drivers that will make you need to move your primary mail. I'm shifting data centers, I've got a lease expiration, I've got, again, the business drivers that are giving you the compelling event to move your mail. That's what's going to drive how we do it. What I'm suggesting to you is best practice. All things, moons, planets line up. This is the way you should be going. Okay? Bandwidth. Do you go direct or do you do the ship to disk? And you notice that I've put that under bandwidth. because bandwidth is typically, in 90+% of circumstances, and 60% of statistics are made up on the spot, but in 90+% of the guys, the migrations we've done, of which there's been over 100 of these that we've done over the past 5.5 years, bandwidth is what drives the biggest discussion. How long is it going to take? And at the end of the day, there is a physics and maths conversation to be had, right? And there is your infrastructure conversation. And are we coming off a slow storage platform? Are we coming off a Centera? Are we coming off a data domain? Are we coming off a SAN, off a NAS, off a locally attached rubbish disk? Is the environment, the archive that's been there, has it ever been care-fed and watered so that it runs properly? All of these things impact that. But when you're looking to do a ship-to-disk concept, you're doing a PST process, and then putting the PSTs on disk and getting the PSTs to their network ship or PST ship to disk, see them as largely the same, okay? If you need to use a third-party tool to extract out of your archive to get to PST, and that same third-party tool can take you directly into 365, it's a key consideration to say, well, why wouldn't I go direct? Again, there are use cases where you wouldn't, because your volume of data is so significant and your time frame within which you want to get to 365 is so narrow that often it could be faster to put it to disk, ship to disk, and talk to your friends at Microsoft and ask them to get you a really fast import service. However, in most use cases, you will get faster migration by going direct from source to target. Quite logical, really. And that's because we can get there. In some cases, and I'm very careful about putting speeds and feeds out there, but I can tell you we have seen sustained throughput of 70 gig an hour of the archives into 365. Yeah, we were very fortunate we had a large link, and if you're going to do ExpressRoute, for example, that's going to help too. So that's where you need to have that consideration about ship to disk versus direct. These are things you need to be aware of as well, and for number 7, it's really just about staying in touch with what Microsoft is changing, because these numbers change relatively frequently, and they only ever grow, by the way. We haven't seen them necessarily reduce. So the size of number of messages you can fit in a folder, maximum size of mail that you can send over. So I'm not sure, is it still 25 meg attachments from the archive going automatically in? I think it is.
I think we've increased that a bit.
See, there you go, it's grown again, right? That's been a week. If you have a mail that has an attachment, historically where we've done migrations, attachments have been 25 meg, we couldn't automatically move them there because 365 wouldn't accept them. As the platform matures and grows, so too do some of these limitations go away, but you do need to be aware of these. Again, particularly if you're going to move them into your own little PST files and try and get them up there, these things are critical. In-place hold versus journal. I could probably spend an hour on this topic alone, right? The amount of material that's out there on the internet, if you read some of the ISV blogs that exist, the amount of material, the amount of conversation we have, oh, Microsoft doesn't do journaling, they do in-place hold, it's different, etc. This is really critical. If you have a journal, and a true journal, if you like, in an archive sense, how do you make your 365 experience the same? It is possible. Okay, so contrary to common belief, it is possible to get the envelope information, i.e. the BCC's distribution lists, into 365 attached to your messages. It is possible to explode the journal so that users can see the journal messages that are attributable to each of them. Again, do you have a journal? Does it need to go? If it does it need to go with all of the stuff that comes with it? Should you need a journal explosion? Come back to point 1, what's your business requirements? Okay, so I'm keep coming back to that because that's what drives all of where you will go from there. And quite frankly, if you get those questions answered up front, you'll get to 365 quicker, because if you don't get those questions answered up front and then you've got to go get those answers, it tends to take a whole lot longer to get through. And this will also help you, again, with your business case. So the message out of this is you can get your journals into 365. You do need to understand how the difference is. They are different, but you can still effectively achieve the same outcome, largely. Departed users. Often people will say, I've got an archive, it's 25 terabytes, it's got 25,000 archives or 1,000 archives, whatever the number is, and I need to get that to 365. Our question in return is, how many of those are active users? How many of those are departed? Do you need to move the departed users at all? Again, our objective is to try and make this project less software, less expensive. If your business driver is, we have to move everything, then you do. You may choose with departed users just to move some of them. And we often get asked as well, how do you provide delegated access? 6 months ago, the answer was you needed to move the departed user into a particular mailbox. Now, the answer is you just move them into a shared mailbox, and Microsoft's clever enough to still allow you to provide delegated access to certain users. Okay? So again, these things change as time goes on, but you do need to be aware of what they mean. Okay? There is a licensing consideration when you're moving departed users. I'm not the licensing guy, okay? That's Ben. I'm just going to flick past that over there if anybody wants to ask how licensing works. I can tell you it is possible. The 40,000 users that I was talking about, I think about 15,000 of those were departed users, and licensing was possible. Okay, so it can be done. It can be done with Swing licensing. Talk to your Microsoft person. They will help you out with that. Shortcuts. We've spoken about shortcuts. Okay, synchronizing shortcuts, making sure that if shortcuts are in folders, because users who have mails will drag those shortcuts into folders, you need to make sure that when the mail gets up to 365 and it's been in a folder, that that folder will be exploded accordingly, right? And that the message will be then available to the users. Whew. Covering a lot. 5 more minutes to go so I can make sure you've got some questions. Any other questions at this point before I get into how do you choose a tool? No? Okay. So, selecting the right tool set. Now, I'm positioning this with you from the perspective of an organisation that works with or has chosen to reject every tool set that is available to do an automated migration. For PSTs, for archives. The reason why we have multiple tools in our kit bag is because not every tool solves every problem. Okay, so to the point that Ben was making earlier, you can use the Microsoft tools, for example, to do PST type drive shipping, those sorts of things. But you may find that your real issue is how do you go and get PSTs? How do you get them off laptops? How do you do them on low bandwidth connections? How do you consolidate them? How do you deduplicate them? How do you send one up to Microsoft? How do you make sure that all the contents of the PST have made it to the target so that those 5 messages, you know what they were and you can report on them and you can maybe retry because you know why they didn't go. These are all different things that will drive, say, for example, a PST selection. In an archive selection, which tool set does Source 1 better than the next? Which one does Enterprise Vault? Which one does EAS? What's the pros and cons? What are you trying to achieve? Which tool set is there? So the analogy that I use is that if you're moving house, so here's your house A, clearly American, and here's your house B. Looks like Barack Obama might have lived there at some point. When you get a removalist in to give you a quote, you basically say to the removalist, I'm going from this house and I'm going to that house. Please come and have a look at all of my contents in my house. And this is how I want you to move them, right? This is my business objectives. I want everything wrapped up. I want to make sure that you take photos of everything before I move it. And so when you get it to the end, you take photos again and show me that they look exactly the same, chain of custody. Okay, you can extend this analogy as far as you want to go. But when you have the removalist there, do you ever say to the removalist, what truck are you using? You actually don't care, right? You say to the removalist, I want you to go from here to here. You choose the truck, 20-foot container, 40-foot container, that's entirely up to you. Similarly, I would tell you, don't concern yourself with which tool, concern yourself with the experience of the organisation that's getting you there. Okay, that's what's more important. Let them choose the tool for you. That way, all you're concerned about is you can just get directly into 365. Seek the outcome, not necessarily the approach. Yeah, it's the same analogy as telephone, right? We all pick up the phone. Well, we used to pick up the old phone, right? I'm older than some. Right, pick up the phone. Nobody sat there and rang Telstra and said, do you use Cisco switches or Alcatel switches or Huawei? What do you guys use? You don't care. You get dial tone. That's what you want. Same applies here, right? Same as a managed service. So long as you're getting your outcome, that's what's critical. Okay? Speed. Not that speed, guys. Fastness. Okay? How fast is it? How long is it going to take? If I had $1 for every question, every time I got asked that question, I'd probably have my own little business just answering that question. Okay? I would suggest to you that speed, more often than not, doesn't matter. And the reason I say that is because very often we will go faster than your organisation can keep up. Okay, because when you're doing a migration, mailbox and archive, you need to be ensuring that your user base is taken care of in the appropriate way. You have a bunch of other internal things that go on that will slow down this project. And again, if you're in hybrid mode, if you're 2010, 2013, and we've got the personal archive, we're just going. We're going in the background, and you can take as long as you want to move your primary mailbox, and we'll sync when you're ready. Often speed doesn't matter. Okay, so I would encourage you not to get too hung up on speed, unless, of course, you've got a compelling event that says, my lease is expiring on this storage and I have to get off it by a certain date. My data center, I need to move my data center by this date. Again, that business requirement will then drive and make speeds a lot more important. And that's when we may recommend a two-step process. Let's go to PST, that's real quick. Because we can go to PST a lot faster than anything else. Okay, so it may be then that that's why a two-step process makes sense. But whether you're going at 2 meg, 5 meg, 10 meg often doesn't matter. What matters is how fast do you need to get there, what's your project duration likely to be. Don't get hung up on the speed. Okay, you can see there on the slide a bunch of reasons why we posit the theory that speed doesn't matter. If you go and look at some of the ISV blogs, you will have fun. Because everyone's saying, we go at this speed, we go at this speed, we go at this speed. It's like, great, but the organization can't. Okay, really important. So, in summary, automated versus manual is the first thing you need to think about. Once you've made that decision, if you know you're going automated, you've got another 10 things to think about. Compare the costs, work out what's compelling, what do you have to do, are there ways that you can reduce the amount of data based on your organizational requirements. Think about these things, concern yourself less with product, more with outcome, and make sure that whoever you're selecting has experience in this. And when I say experience, I mean real-world experience, okay? I can tell you, after having done so many of these projects, right, if it wouldn't scare you all a whole lot more, I'd show you scars and bruises. This stuff is not simple, okay? It is complicated. An archive is not like a primary mailbox. An archive has compressed messages in it. It has single instance messages in it. It has often encrypted messages in it. It has deduplicated messages in it. It has a whole sort of different thing. And every archive is different to the next. And I can also say to you that each and every client that we work with has different requirements, literally different requirements one to the next, nuances in their environment that drive which way to go. Okay, so this stuff is not easy. Make sure whoever you select to do this has the experience, understands your source archive, not just understands 365. Okay, so if you can do an Enterprise Vault, you want someone who understands Enterprise Vault and has done it. You want to do Source 1, you want someone who understands Source 1. Because often we need to get in the back end into the databases and do things to make this stuff happen. Bang on. All right. Top, number 10, right? This is where you do 10. Any questions, everyone? Public folders, yes. Are they in your archive? You've got public folders archived, or they're live public folders?
Handball. Fantastic. So at the very start, we said we were going to be doing inactive stuff. So see me after, we can talk about it, but that's fundamentally more a migration activity around active stuff. So there's different ways of doing it, but sort of outside the ambit of this session.
If someone's like purely Office 365 has not set up the Azure tenant, like you have to set up the Azure tenant to do the data migration, the manual one, and write the blobs and everything, or is there something in Office 365 that sort of hides it that does it for you?
So the question was whether you need access to Azure AD in order to use any of the stuff that I've done today. And the answer is I created an Office 365 tenant and I've not touched the Azure portal at all. So all of the stuff you've seen today does not require you to log into Azure at all. There are benefits in doing so, but all I've done is I just got a stock standard demo tenant, or a trial tenant, started doing some stuff against it, no Azure involved. But clearly Azure is under the covers being accessed. So we're using Azure as part of the service, but you don't need to have that Azure subscription for this bit. I don't have any information on costings.
If you've got
How does that work in Office 365?
I'll need to talk to you afterward. I'm not familiar with how that data is kept. So the question was whether something like Titus or Geneseal, etc., where there's classification that's attached to email and whether that stuff can be maintained moving to 365.
Migrating policies.
Yeah. It's not one I have an answer for you today. But if you stick around, there's someone in the room that might be able to help you too.
Just one other thing, by the way, if anybody here has Enterprise Vault, make sure the tool set that you select to do your migration, if you are going to concern yourself with the tool set, make sure it's a Veritas. Now it's Veritas, not Semantic. I nearly said Semantic. I did actually. Make sure it's an approved tool set.
So are there many approved?
There are. There are, and I'm happy to talk to you afterwards and talk you through what they look like. There are many approved and there are many not. Yeah. That's just so that you can have supportability. You want your environment to be supported by the vendor when your migration's happening.
Right. If there's no more questions, or no one's willing to say publicly, we'll call it a wrap. Thank you very much for your attendance. We'll be around for a few minutes if you've got any questions that you didn't want to say out loud. But thank you very much.